All right. So today, Mega Wednesday, I have a guest. First time ever having a guest. We've got Alan here. And Alan is writing a book. Maybe I can share my screen here and show you this book. It's When Coffee and Kale Compete. That's the page, whencoffeeandkalecompete.com. This book is blowing my mind, mostly because I thought I understood jobs to be done. And Alan, you have been able to articulate it and kind of round it out in a way I just never experienced before. I especially found the history helpful. In my mind, when I tell the story of jobs, I always mention Clayton Christensen and the milkshake experiment, but you like go way, way back, and to see kind of this history of jobs and where it came from is super interesting. So maybe just to start, maybe just talk a little bit about why you decided to write the book and kind of how it's going to be released. And there's some interesting things there.
Absolutely. So what happened was I was doing my last business, which was AIM, which is a marketplace for real estate brokers and mortgage bankers to legally, that's the key word, legally share leads with each other. And it was being successful. And I had just passed it off to a co-founder because I no longer wanted to run that business. Just, it wasn't my thing.
Yeah.
And I had applied my own experience of using jobs to be done from scratch to build this business. And that's when I realized that idea, combined with all these people always asking me, on Twitter or email, like ask me questions about jobs. And that's when I realized, wow, there's so many holes and so many gaps in understanding jobs to be done. And I thought, well, I got to put this down, at least if anything, at worst case scenario for myself. So I could figure out all the inconsistencies, because a few years ago, it's maybe a little better now, but there still are now, but there are a lot of inconsistencies out there to the way that people approach it, which is, I think I talked about in the book, it's been kind of like this game of telephone. It started in the 80s with, Bob Mesta, Richard Petty, and John Palmer. These guys, they were working together, and they're the ones who kind of coined the language of jobs to be done.
And before we get too far,
I'm sorry.
No, this is great. This is great. Before we get too far, though, I know the number one question people have is, what is jobs?
Okay.
And so how would you describe what jobs is?
Very simply, it's a collection of principles that help us understand customer motivation.
Okay.
Does that work?
When we say, and let's dig into that a little bit deeper. You, in the book, you introduce this idea that jobs is a response to people wanting to make progress within a given system.
Okay. Yes.
Now, what does that mean? And why is that different than product first kind of thinking, or idea first kind of thinking, or innovation?
Let's see here. So perhaps maybe we'll put the system thing aside for right now, because that's another very kind of giant topic, which is very cool. That could be a whole episode right there. Kind of digging into systems thinking. But for right now, I think I'll focus in on the idea of progress, which is, when we're going about through our lives, we've got this picture in our mind of how we would like things to be in any given situation and varying contexts. And when we're like living that picture that we have in our mind, we're happy. There's this nice balance in our lives and we're just going on. But if for some reason there's this picture in our minds of how we want life to be and it's not quite right, then that's when we want to make progress towards that version of ourselves that is better. So if I, suppose I'm perfectly happy as a family man, I've got my wife and kids and we're having a good times, but then perhaps I see a commercial where there's some dad on TV and he's grilling and the kids are all happy. And then like, that's the moment when I think, oh, wow, like I want that. I want to be like that. I want my kid to be happy like that. And then that's when that moment in your mind, when you've got now a new picture of how you want your life to be in a particular way, right? In this particular context. And now you're going to do whatever you can to do to make that better version of yourself, to make that picture in your mind a reality.
And so for me personally, I think one of the examples that came up in my head was, well, two things. I'll give two examples. One is when I was working a day job and I was commuting every day, hour to work, hour back, I started hearing from these guys, Rob Walling, Jason Fried, all these folks that had built and launched their own products. And their approach to life and the kind of autonomy and freedom they had, I'm sitting in my car and I'm going, man, I would kill for that. Like, I want that so badly. And so before, I didn't even realize that was possible. I thought like you just have to go to work and doesn't matter, and for me, it meant I had to live in the suburbs and commute downtown. And then they opened my mind to like, whoa, this is possible. And from that moment, I was like, I have to get there. And so progress for me was like, I'm going to get a remote job that gives me a little bit more autonomy. I'm going to start some side hustle, which gives me more autonomy. And then, just November or January, I'm like, I'm going to go independent and kind of complete that loop. And now I'm like, I'm hustling, I'm making enough to feed the kids and stuff, but I want to have enough income so I can start putting money away. Now I've got a new goal, a new thing I'm kind of going after. And so is that a good example of progress in jobs?
Absolutely. And there's actually two really great points that you touched on, which really explain this idea or articulate very well this idea of progress. And the first is that when you personally, when you were driving to work every day, you just accepted that this is just the way life is. And that's, and if you think about it, like there was a balance in this system. Or if you were upset and unhappy with it, you just accepted that that's just the way things were. And I think that's an important part that we have to understand as innovators. Actually, we were just talking about this on Twitter today. You have to make sure, innovation is just not about making your new widget or that solves some problem. You have to make sure that customers can understand that this widget, this innovation can help them make progress. Because you have to show them that better version of themselves. And then that's when that picture in their mind changes. And then that's when they'll want to make progress. So I think that's the first very interesting thing. And the second great point, which you had brought out, was when you talked about when you wanted to, you kind of made the first, Justin 2.0, which was stop doing the whatever, restaurant or construction work you were doing, and then, work for myself. So you had made progress in that. So you kind of hit that first milestone in your mind, that first picture in your mind. But then when you overcame that, then the picture in your mind changed again. Now you kind of reset the goalposts for a new progress. You redefine progress for yourself. So now you need more innovations or more tools and more help to continue making progress. So it's not, and that's kind of why I talked about before that we kind of need to get rid of this idea that customers have the static needs. It's just, it's like whatever I quote need, it means always changing. It just depends on where I am in making progress. It's just whatever I can do to help get to the next part, because what I need today is going to be different than what I need next week or next year if I make progress.
Yeah. And that was the other part. And seriously, folks, that the book is very sophisticated. When Coffee and Kale Compete.com, it really went into details that I had not thought about before. And the way you present it is it felt like I was getting an MBA in in jobs. Like you're just like, here's the base. And then eventually you get into this idea of these cycles. And I can't remember what you call it, but it's not just like a perfect loop. It's like this cycle that keeps going and gets bigger and bigger. And I've experienced that for sure. Product People Club, which is an example in the book, as I'm reading it, I'm like, holy smokes, this is it. Because a month ago, we had a bunch of people leave. And, it's always sad when people leave your product, something you've built, or are not using it anymore. And this was before I'd read your book, but I came to this conclusion of like, well, of course they've left. They've made progress, right?
Yes, exactly.
They're done.
Yep.
And so there's people like Ryan Hoover from Product Hunt, who's a member, and Robert Williams from Let's Workshop, and Samuel Hulick from User Onboard. These were all early product people members, and some of them have left.
Yes.
On the other hand, there's some people that have made progress, but I've been able to stay just enough ahead of them that they continue to be engaged because it's still helpful for them.
Yes.
And I think, and one experiment we just did is getting some of these more senior folks to come back and engage again. And there's kind of two roles they're playing now. One is progress for them is about legacy. And so now they want to come back and teach other people. And so there's the job that they're hiring it to do now is as someone with more experience, I want to teach some of these folks that are just getting started. And then the other thing is that they've got new problems. Now they've got a business they're proud of, but their problems are all about growth and scale. And so that's something else I'm thinking, man, maybe there's something else we can provide. So I think that's awesome. The other example I wanted to give, just to give people an idea of how this works, and I love this one about coffee because I think, for a long time, coffee was just caffeinated liquid. And then Starbucks came along, and we started hiring Starbucks for very particular jobs, right? And so for me, one of those jobs is, again, it's so funny how it's like so aspirational. But, when I got my remote job, I was looking through Tumblr and Instagram, and I'm seeing all these people work from cool coffee shops. And I'm stuck in this little office with one little window, working remote by myself. And I'm like, I got to get there. I got to start working from coffee shops.
Yeah.
It looks cool. It feels like that would make me feel like I've arrived a little bit more.
Yes.
It gives me an opportunity to take a Instagram photo and share it. And you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely.
And I love that idea of like taking something that some people just thought was functional, like you just drink caffeinated liquid to kind of wake up. But it goes beyond that. Now, here's what I want you to kind of jump in.
Okay.
Is you've also introduced this idea of Starbucks' only competitor is not Dunkin' Donuts and is not that local hipster coffee shop. There's other kinds of competition. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Is it something specific from the book?
In terms of product categories or product types. So you might think that Starbucks' only competitor is, like I said, Dunkin' Donuts, Tim Hortons here in Canada. But there are other things that people could hire to do some of those same jobs. And in your case, it's the title of your book, right?
Oh, right. Yeah. So that's, again, that's the reason why I chose that title of that book was because I really wanted to make the emphasis that get away that from this idea of product categories, right? That's just, okay, coffee only competes with other coffee drinks, or maybe it competes with a Red Bull, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then, I actually, so it's funny, the title of the book, okay, so maybe this is kind of funny. I'll tell why the book is called it is through a story, because people like stories, right? We're explaining animals. We love it. So it was about a month or two ago. And I was trying to figure out a good title for the book. And so I went for a walk in the park, and it's about 8:30, 8 or 8:30 in the morning. And I'm just sitting there, I'm thinking like, oh, what can I do? And I just started noticing that the people walking around, about half of them would have, the Starbucks white with the brown coffee thing. And then a lot of other people were walking around with those juice drinks that they have.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of hit me, like, okay, like that's it. Like people are switching there, they're wanting to make this progress, and they're switching from having a coffee drink to these like kale smoothies, which is all fashionable. And then also reminding me of another story of someone who I know, who I work with, who was telling me that she works really wonky hours. Yeah. And so she used to drink coffee, but that would just destroy her sleeping. Right. Mm-hmm. And so she switched to having these like kale smoothies with wheatgrass, because that would still give her a little bit of a charge, but it wasn't caffeine. It wouldn't disrupt her sleeping patterns too much. Yeah. And so that's just, again, we're showing that two things there, that you should not restrict your competition, define it by features or by a product, but rather you should define competition by what helps customers make progress. Yeah. Yeah, totally. And the reason this is like so like just like hitting me is I keep seeing examples of this. So again, like I was literally reading, I'm still going through your book. I was literally reading it last night. And I was thinking of this conversation I was having in a forum for podcasters. And the point I was trying to make, of course, this is like an internet argument. The point I was trying to make is, podcasters want advertising revenue right now. Yes. And what I was trying to say is that advertisers want to make progress, right? Yeah. And we often don't think about that. Like they want to make progress. And even like if you like drill down to the guy who's buying the ads or the gal buying the ads, what does progress look like to them? And in a second, I want you to explain functional versus emotional. Oh, but okay. Emotionally, progress to them might mean she goes into that quarterly meeting and she's able to say, I bought these ads and I got 200x ROI. So I put in $1 and I got $200, and emotionally everyone like claps and the boss says yes, and she gets a raise. And yes. There's all these like, that's progress to her. Right. And what I was trying to say in this podcasting forum is that these advertisers could hire all sorts of products for advertising. They could hire podcasts, low intent kind of branding awareness ads, but they could also hire Facebook, which is also low intent, low intent branding ads. And they're going to choose whichever one makes them feel like they're getting the most progress. And so people didn't see Facebook even as a competitor, but it's like a competitor is whatever, like it's not just other podcasts aren't your competition who are grabbing all these ad dollars. It's also Facebook. It's also them starting their own podcast. It's also, all these other things. Yeah. And so I was just like, man, like this idea of, within not thinking that there's other competition within your category and outside of your category. And we don't see those things. Like the example you gave in the book was the film camera people didn't see the competition coming from the smartphone because phones were these dumb little things with Nokia screens. They never saw it coming. And all of a sudden, no one uses a film camera, and now everybody is using digital cameras. Yes. Absolutely. I think your example there about the advertisers who would like something like Facebook. So let's compare and contrast that. Like why might advertisers prefer Facebook over newspaper ads, for example, right? Yeah. Now, we all know that advertising is just notoriously difficult to actually evaluate because you don't really know do we actually know that this actually created a sale? Because often you're just kind of planting seeds in people's minds that sometime in the future they will buy your product.
Yeah.
But going back to what you were talking about, Facebook gives a lot of these people the feeling that they're making progress by giving them all these numbers. So they can go into the meeting and be like, well, okay, I can't prove that we sold more of our product because we instead of spending $1 million on newspaper ads, we spent $1 million on Facebook. But Facebook gave me all these numbers that I can show you, my boss, that I just made a good decision by taking us off newspapers to Facebook. So now, I look better in front of my boss. So I'm making progress. So that's like, again, it's the understanding of what people are trying to make. And that's why things like, AdSense from Google and the Facebook ads are so popular for people, because they like those numbers. They like tracking things. So they can show their own bosses and prove that their plan is working.
Yeah. And by the way, for anyone who's listening or watching, and I know I've mentioned this a lot, it's kind of like my dead horse, I keep saying, but in terms of a job to be done, pleasing your boss is a huge one. Right? Yeah. Like at the end of the day, what do you really want to do? You want to please your boss. That's like why a lot of, especially in the B2B market, why a lot of people hire services is they want to look good in front of their boss and in front of their peers. And I have so many examples of this. Like another one was when I was doing consulting, my boss said, hey, can someone like quickly create a banner or something? No, can we get the designer to create a banner? And everyone's like, okay, well, that'll take a day or whatever. And I just went into Canva.com and I quickly created one and posted it into Slack in about 5 minutes. And my boss was like, holy shit, how did you do that? It was like magic to him. And that feeling of like, oh, the boss is impressed and let everyone else know, like, I'm going to hire Canva all the time, until everybody's using Canva and it's no longer special. And now I have to find a new way to be special.
Yeah. So that's actually, I would hate to hijack your conversation, but maybe this is we can go somewhere very interesting with this, right? Because that was actually great what you just said. So, and again, you just really made the great point that product, what was it? Canvas or Canva?
Canva.com.
Okay, Canva. Okay. It was no longer delivering you progress. Like once everyone else caught on to it, it was no longer delivering you progress. So that's just like so crucial to think about. And that's why, because we had talked before on email and you asked about the iPhone 7, like why might someone upgrade to the iPhone 7? Well, like for example, if you are someone who is hiring the iPhone or being a part of the Apple culture to be cutting edge, right? Yeah. Like that's one of the jobs I'm hiring the iPhone for is, I want this feeling that I'm on the edge. Yeah. I'm in the know.
Yeah. And peers also, like if you go into an office and all your friends have upgraded, that's a huge one. And I experienced this myself at XOXO Festival, because I never pre-ordered a phone before. And all of a sudden I showed up the next day and everyone's like, so were you up last night pre-ordering? And I'm like, no. And they're like, oh, well, and everyone had pre-ordered. And I was just like, oh man, like I'm the only one that didn't pre-order. So the next year I made sure I pre-ordered. Yes. It was a total peer thing. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah. Well, that's it. So it's like, again, that just shows about how, again, bring it back to that. We kind of need to get away from this idea of these like static needs, like it's a check mark to go off, and that our systems are always evolving and things are always changing. And that is that the iPhone 6, was perfectly fine for you. That there was a sync between the progress you wanted to make and the iPhone 6 was giving you. Like it was great. That sync got disrupted only when the iPhone 7 came out. Yeah. So like if the iPhone 7 came out next year, that sync would only be disrupted next year. You'd be fine right now.
Yeah.
So like you have to think about that it's only when that picture in your mind changes, or kind of what we were talking about before, when when maybe the picture doesn't change, but the product you're currently using can no longer deliver you that progress. So it's like nothing wrong with the product itself.
Yeah.
It's just that it's no longer delivering the progress you want because there's something else that you see out there that can deliver you more progress.
Yeah. And this might be a good time to jump into, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna mess up this name, Sreten Jovanik.
Wow. Okay.
The question here is, how do you stay patient as a product owner when you know the time between progress steps will take longer than you like? Is this where small steps come in? So in some ways, you brought that up, is, Apple could release a new phone every 5 years if they wanted to. And so one way they've dealt with that issue is they have a yearly release cycle.
Yep.
So instead of having a 5-year release cycle, they're introducing something every year, which creates that, is that pull or push?
It's a little bit of both.
Yeah. Creates that pull and push of like, you need a new phone. I need a new phone, or however that works.
Yeah.
And so that would be one answer. Can you think of anything else?
Yeah, absolutely. So customers, right? I don't want to use the abstract customers. It's all of us, right? We always want the feeling that we're making progress. So even if you can't, let's use an example. Going to the gym. Like, I have this big goal in my mind. I want to lose 10 pounds.
Yeah.
Well, okay. You can't rush that. I mean, you can't do that realistically in a week. I mean, let's just be reasonable here. But what you can do, okay, so if you're a gym and you want to keep people engaged, coming to the gym and signing up for gym membership, you need to make sure that they're making progress towards that goal. So it might take them a month, 6 months, or a year to lose that 10 pounds. But if you're able to figure out a way to help them recognize that they're making progress, then they'll continue coming to the gym. So maybe it's like, we give you a personal trainer who writes down all of your exercises and like, oh, okay, last week you did 10 reps of this week you did 15 reps. Like, you're making progress, or you're getting stronger. So you can just find these little wins, I guess maybe you can call them, or like little indicators of progress that people are making, and help them. Or it's like, again, the gym example, make sure that you're constantly making sure that they're like sweating and like they're getting a good workout. So because if I go to the gym, like at first I used to run for 30 minutes and I would sweat, but I don't sweat anymore. It's like you're still like getting in shape, but your mind, because you're so used, you think sweating equals like exercise and getting better. So you got to like figure out ways to make your customers sweat again. So you have to, again, deliver them progress.
Yeah, totally. And maybe this would be a good time to explain, because the other kind of like big revelation in your book is you're saying jobs are emotional.
Oh yeah.
So explain that for us. In the software industry, we're really focused on features and functionality. What do you mean when you say jobs are emotional?
Yeah, so it's all about kind of what we were just talking about before. It's that feeling that I'm getting closer to that picture in my mind of how I want things to be. And for customers' point of view, it's like that's all that really matters. It's like am I happy with the direction I'm going in and how fast I'm going in that direction.
Yeah.
And people don't really, it's, all customers' expectations are what you or a competitor have led them to believe.
Yeah.
So that's why I say that, don't think about jobs in as far as functionality or anything like that, because you're just describing how the product works. And that's harder for people to, grok and get their heads around until you start recognizing or start seeing how different the competition is from making progress. Like, I think the best example of a wide variety of products that counted as competition came from Clarity. From a functional point of view, Clarity is a talk to an expert over the internet service. Yeah. But Dan Martell, who founded Clarity, then sold it off, he found out that in the past, people had tried using LinkedIn, giving away advisory shares in their company, attending conferences. Like these are like functionally, these are completely different.
Yeah.
But in the customer's mind, it's all getting them closer towards that, help me connect with someone whose accomplishments I admire. So some of that success will rub off on me and I can go out and be successful. Like that's the progress that they were trying to make. And they would do whatever they wanted to do, or engage in any kind of functionality or products that they felt could make them, give them that progress.
Yeah. And it's not to say that like functionality and tech and design aren't important. Like I'm thinking about Slack and why so many people wanted to move to Slack. And I mean, a lot of people have tried to unravel this, but I mean, Slack has amazing design. Slack has, I'm assuming, amazing tech underneath it. Like it's pretty responsive, it's fast. But those all just contributed to how people felt when they used it.
Yep.
And there was something about people using it and they were just like, this is progress. Like having this in my life makes me feel like I'm getting ahead, or makes me feel good, or makes me feel like work is fun. Like there's all these like emotional, I actually think initially a lot of it was just that it made work feel fun.
Yeah. So, okay. So that's very interesting. And I think that goes back also to that question you had read from someone who had written in. So maybe you also read about, I think it was Jason Fried, right? Who of Basecamp, who kind of talked about how kind of Slack is kind of maybe just putting you like on the hamster wheel. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's interesting. So this is, again, shows about how this idea of progress, and that it's all about this feeling. So technically Slack might make you less productive. Yeah. But you feel like that you're being more productive because you have this constant interaction with other people, but actually the overall effect might be a drain on the company. Yeah, but again, that kind of goes back to this idea of that, well, it's just for whatever reason, Slack is giving you that feeling that, we have great communication and we're constantly working together and camaraderie or whatever it is. Yeah, totally. And it also shows like people will switch once they feel like eventually you might feel like, you know what? I need to get some work done now. And the whole company's not getting any work done. And now I'm just frustrated. And so then that Jason really tapped into that with this whole idea of work can wait and chat should not be ubiquitous. And so he's like just touching that nerve inside of us for those of us that reach the point where we're like, Slack is a distraction. It was fun at first, but now it's bullshit. And then he's saying, well, if you switch to Basecamp, you're going to make progress. In terms of, getting your work done. Yep. And, there's still lots of people using Slack, but a lot of people switched and said, you know what, I need this. This is progress for me now. Yep. And, it's fascinating to look at that. Yep. And so actually, if I'm like, I jump in again, if I were on the Slack team, so if it was me and I was seeing this people happen, I would maybe, think about, okay, how can we help managers kind of tell people how to use Slack more correctly? Or maybe we add in a feature like for managers, like, okay, between 10 and 3 are like quiet hours where maybe notifications get like archived, or I don't know, they get turned off or paused or something. So it's like, we can still people use Slack, but we have these like quiet hours set to keep people from feeling overwhelmed. Yes. And some people are asking how you kind of figure this stuff out. Oh, that's a great question. I'd like you to talk about the interview option. But one thing I want to say in ways I do this, one way I observe this kind of like struggle in the real world is online. Especially if your audience is online, you can just like see what's happening and check this out. So if I was Slack, I'd be paying attention to this. Marco Arment created this app called Quitter. And he just built it for himself. And then so many people contacted him that they said they wanted it, that he released it for the public. But what it does
is it automatically hides or quits Slack after a certain amount of minutes of inactivity. And so you can see now people are moving to Marco's app because progress to them is like, I don't want, for example, they have a do not disturb option.
Yeah.
But you have to do it in every single Slack team.
Yeah.
I don't want that shit. I just want you to like fucking hide this thing so I can get back to work,
Yep.
And there's these, the same way you would observe, an animal in the wild and take notes, you can sometimes say, wow, that's interesting. Like, look at all these people moving this way. You can see there's a nerve there. And sometimes those things don't bubble up to management, for example, at Slack, where, they could build that in and solve that job for a lot of people, right?
Yep, absolutely. So that's great. So that's an example of, and I mentioned about it in the book, where seeing where people exhibit compensatory behavior. I always get that word, right? Behavior, right? It's like, times where people are self-aware enough or creative enough to kind of come up with their own hacks or workarounds. Those are great innovation opportunities. And that helps for, when you're doing for consumers, or even if it's just in the B2B world. Like, for example, people who write their passwords on like Post-it notes and put it on their, like, that's them compensating for some behavior. And that represents an innovation opportunity for someone. Yeah,
that's awesome. And so for folks, like, this is the number one question I get. And this is actually something that Darian Rosebrook asked in the Product People Club. He says, is there a way you can audit yourself or your ideas to validate if it's a good idea? How does job to be done handle that?
Yes.
And I think this would be, so we've mentioned observation, but you talk a lot about, and Bob and Chris and all those other guys have done a lot of work on this idea of interviews. And so maybe kind of describe what a jobs to be done interview is and how you approach it, and how it helps you kind of figure those things out.
Yep. So I will. So we can actually tie in a little bit to before. About kind of the history of jobs. I talk about how kind of some of the nascent ideas come from guys like Schumpeter, and this idea of creative destruction, which is basically, we'll skip all the boring details, but basically, people, there's only so many minutes in a day that I have to use on things.
Yes.
So I'm only using one product at a time, or maybe, a combination of things, which is a little bit more complicated, but it's, I'm using some solution to make progress.
Or
some combination of products to make solutions. So if you're an
and
innovator,
an example is you're not going to have an iPhone and an Android device likely.
So actually, And so this is how. So fundamentally, you have to know, okay, what are people going to stop using when they start using my product? And so there's two things there. So one. The first thing is that you can guarantee that there's some demand taking place. That, okay, people are actually putting down money and spending. This is actually a problem, and they are willing to pay. And I don't have to, this is not, hey, Mom, like, isn't this cool? Would you buy this? Or, hey, Justin, this is neat. Would you buy this? Sure, Alan. Yeah, I'll pay whatever. It's that, it's like, oh, yeah, you've been spending $20 a month on this. So I know that there's at least a $20 a month budget that I can steal away. So that's like the first thing you have to find out. And the second thing
is super key. Like that right there. And you talk about this in the book. And what I love about jobs is it often kind of reveals these things I've felt in my gut, but then they kind of get expressed and you're like, yes, that's it. Because for example, like Steve Jobs knew, or we're going to guess here, but Steve Jobs knew that people were spending money on film cameras. Like everyone, if you grew up in the 80s, you would take photos and then you would take them to the place and they would get developed. It was expensive. So people are already spending money on that. For him to add a camera app is him saying there's already people spending money on that would very likely hire this as well if
Yep.
it helps them make progress.
Right.
But the challenge we often see is people will find jobs that need to be done, but no one's paying for them.
Okay. Yep. So that's, and I think maybe in the updated version of the book, I dropped in some stuff from Des. I don't know if it's in the version I sent you, but Des Trainer from Intercom, he said it beautifully. And it's true. It's like some problems are just people are willing to put up with it, and that's the truth. We have to accept that people might say, oh, I don't know. Go look in the Apple App Store. Like, do I need another to-do app? Like, this is like, I'm actually, I write down my to-dos on a piece of paper. It kind of sucks, but you know what? It's good enough. Like, good enough is good enough. And so that's, unless you can say like, oh, there are, I don't know, 100,000 people out there who have spent $5 on a to-do app. If I can do mine better, maybe I can steal those customers away.
Yeah. And good enough is the kiss of death for ideas. Like when you hear that, yeah. And so now maybe talk about interviews and how they help unearth this stuff.
Yep. So kind of tying in with that idea that, well, we have to confirm that there is some struggle taking place and that customers are willing, that they're expressing a willingness to pay for a solution for this. We have to talk about how they try to solve this problem in the past. So I'll talk about it with my personal example. I don't know if you've got this far in the book, but when I was creating AIM, which is that marketplace between mortgage brokers and mortgage bankers, I had to have in my mind, okay, like whose budget am I stealing away from, and what behaviors are they going to stop doing when they start using my product? Yeah. And I found out that, okay, well, I would happen to have some connections with people in the banking industry, and I found out like, wow, these banks can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to get leads. A lead is someone looking for a mortgage. So I'm like, okay, there's a budget there. Like there's money for me I can tap into. So next thing is, okay, like how are they trying to solve the problem now? And they were doing things like going to industry events and just meeting other people in the industry, handing out their business cards. They would show up mortgage bankers. Okay, so mortgage bankers are the people who are putting down the money. So we have to follow them, follow the money. Yeah. And so sometimes they would go to open house. They would kind of like team up with real estate broker, like, wink, wink. I'm going to show up at your open house, and then I'm just going to put down my business cards here. Like they would do that. They would just show up and then, talk to people coming by. Oh, nice place. Do you need a mortgage, by the way? Or just even buying leads. Like, if you just Google right now, like mortgage leads, there's tons of companies out there that sell mortgage leads. Yeah. So that's okay. So those are like the 3 or 4 or 5 behaviors I wanted them to stop doing. And when they started using my product. Yeah. And so I would talk to these guys, and this prevented, so this, we're getting out to the interview. Yeah. And this is maybe kind of interesting too, because I can talk about a unique interview, situation. These guys make tons of money. Yeah. So, and I was only, and the only reason why I was able to kind of talk with them was because they knew I was working on some product. Yeah. And, they're kind of greedy guys. So they're like, oh, maybe, I'll talk to this guy, he'll make something for me to make me more money. Anyway. Yeah. But I still only had like 20 minutes with these guys. Like, so I don't have much time to talk to them. So, but basically it's just, I would just be like, I would just have my questions on it, but I'd say, okay. And again, it's all about like revealed preference, what they've done in the past. I'd say, okay, do you spend money on trying to acquire leads today? Yes or no? How much do you spend? When was the last time that you tried to buy leads? How did that go? When was the last time you attended a open house? How often do you do that? So it's basically, I'm just asking them how they're trying to solve this problem in the past. Mm-hmm. But also comparing, contrasting what they did and didn't like about particular solutions. So they would say, oh, buying leads online. Well, I'll spend $50,000 for 1,000 leads, but maybe, you know, I don't know which ones are good and which ones are bad. So I spend all day just like calling people up, and maybe they're good, maybe it's not. So then, okay, so then I know that, okay, so there's like, there's some quality where it's like, okay, they don't want to be wasting their time like chasing bad leads. Okay, that's good. And then, you know, then like, oh, okay, well, when I want to go to an open house, sometimes I'll show up and it's, you know, the house is only being sold for $100,000, you know, some cheap amount. And the mortgage is not that much. So my profit from that is not that much. So it's a waste of my time. Like, okay, great. So they have this criteria in their mind where they're looking for loans at a particular, like over $1 million.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you kind of like build up these hiring criteria, I call them.
Yeah.
Through things they do and don't like in the past.
And so you were trying to identify struggle points. Like, was your mind flagging these? Like, you're like, okay, they don't like to waste time. That's a big one. They like to make money. That's a big one. So you were kind of flagging these and like, right. And also flagging what they were using.
Yes.
And then kind of saying, okay, here's the gap essentially.
Yep. And so that's cool when I kind of came up with the pitch for it and the product, which basically was, and it was great. They were loving it, which was basically, and again, this kind of goes back to, you know, it's not about functionality and not about features, it's about progress, where like there was, okay, so when we started off, my co-founder was saying, oh, we need to build this dashboard and this and that, whatever. And I said, okay, well, what if, you know, and I kind of stole the idea, of course, you know, from Google, you know, the ads, the banner ads. But I'm like, okay, well, what if we just like, what if just their phone rang with people wanting mortgages? Like, and that was it. Yeah. Like, that's what they want. Like, they don't want to be searching. They don't want to be looking at reports, dashboards. They just like, make my phone ring with people looking for leads. I'm sorry, with leads looking for mortgages. Yeah. And so that was like the job to be done, which is like take away the stress and whatever of like dealing with finding people with the leads so I can get back to my job of closing deals and getting people mortgages. Cause that's what that's what I'm about. I don't care about the other crap.
Yeah. And what you just said would have made a great headline and subheadline on a landing page.
Yes.
We'll make your phone your phone ring with new leads so you can get back to this and make more money. Yeah. Like that would be all that you would need.
Yes.
And what a great way to validate whether you've actually hit that, the right job to be done, is put that on the landing page and see how people respond.
Yep.
And is that what you did?
Yes. Although, so it's, you know, for this product, there were some unique challenges because these guys are a little, again, they were so used to the you know, the handshake way, the face-to-face kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So there were some anxieties around this kind of new way. So we did do some things where it's like, okay, well, you know, try it, you know, we'll give you the first 20 or 30 leads for free, basically. Then after that,
okay,
well, you know, you'll have to pay. So that kind of eased that anxiety because, you know, they don't want to throw down, you know, go ahead and, okay, sure, you know, I will commit to a $5,000 a month budget with your advertising network. Mm-hmm. You know, off the bat, be like, okay, well, okay, first we'll promote your stuff. We'll put your banners out there, and mm-hmm. and then your phone will start ringing, and then that overcome the anxiety.
Yeah,
like, will it work? And then like, oh, okay, great, it does work, and so fine, you know, sign me up.
Yeah, and that was part of my confusion about jobs is where does the handoff happen? Because it sounds like in your case, like jobs helped you get to that initial hypothesis. Mm. And then you were able to put, you know, in this case, let's say a landing page out that says, you know, we'll make your phone ring with leads. Yeah. And then you realized there was some anxiety, there was some pushback. And so jobs is still going here because now you're trying to reduce that anxiety.
Yep.
Right. And so it does sound like jobs leads into the product development cycle as well, right?
Yeah. So, okay. So now we're getting back to what we said before about this whole idea of a system.
Yeah.
Which is where, you know, it's like when we have to understand all the interactions that happen between customers, their job to be done, and the products that they hire for those jobs. And we have to study the interactions themselves and kind of where they get hung up on that as they're kind of moving through that system of making progress. And so for example, very interesting. So at first so the first version of the product, which again, I don't want to spend too much time talking about it, but it was, I did kind of go that conventional route of, okay, we'll do this mailer and then we'll have this landing page and people will read it and then whatever. But again, going back to this idea of studying customer progress as a system, that's not how these bankers were used to making progress.
Yeah.
They were used to like handshake deals. Like, I want to meet the guy. I want to know who you are. If you sent them a website, they'd be like, why am I looking at a website? Like, screw this. Like, so actually we didn't even have a website, honestly, right? Because we were, it was just through kind of leads and talking to other bankers, other companies, and developing our leads in the convention. See, again, and this kind of goes back to where the interview is so helpful.
Yeah.
We would go to those industry events, right? And meet them, like, and be like, oh, okay, I know you're here as a mortgage banker to meet real estate brokers who might give you leads. Well, I have this other thing. You can meet with me and I'll get you set up and whatever. So it's understanding about how all the interactions. So that's, and we want to talk about that graphic with the system. You have to study how your customers are searching for and choosing a solution for a job to be done.
That's right. I love that example because they didn't care what people think. Like, people want software, but no one wants software. Like, they just want the progress.
That's it.
And so if someone comes along that can give them that progress without software and they like it better, there's less anxiety about it, they're going to win. People are going to switch from software to whatever that new thing is, right?
Yes. Yep.
And that's a good reminder for us. Like, we're often like, we're so stuck on like, no, I'm a software person and I just build software. And that is the danger you get into in the book, which is like, you get into that thinking, you're going to get creamed because someone's going to come along and say, well, I don't even do software. I just cut out that altogether and there's no logins, there's nothing. And customers like it better. Yeah.
It's like, I kind of, like I think about like as the genie, like the genie test. Yeah. Like, if your customer could like rub a lamp and a genie could pop up, like, what would they say to the genie to like make their problems go away?
Yeah.
Right. Or like, so it's like, like that's a good way that it just doesn't really matter what your product does. Like, the genie can solve their problem for them.
Yeah, totally. That really clarifies it, right? Because it's like, rub the genie and it comes out and it's like, do you want better software? And you're like, no, I want more money. Come on. Like, that's what I really want. That's progress.
I spend all day looking at this Excel spreadsheet and like, I should be on the phone closing deals. Like,
exactly.
I hate this. Okay, sure, no problem.
I love that.
Every day. Don't worry about it.
I love that, man. That's so interesting. We're gonna go right away here because we've been on for. Well, actually, we got a few more minutes. We started a little bit late. Let me just quickly see if there's anything we've kind of missed. I've got a really hard question from people who are watching live that we're gonna end with.
Awesome.
But I want to make sure that we have kind of covered what I want to talk about.
Did I answer your interview question? Okay. So, we got enough.
Yeah. And I think interviews, I think some anxiety people have about interviews, and I had this too, is one, I don't want to talk to people on the phone. And, I don't want to like that awkwardness of like talking to people. I also sometimes had anxiety over like what were the right questions to ask and if I was doing it right. And maybe just from my experience, and maybe you could jump in here too. One thing to simplify it, I just said, to get better at this, I just have to do it. And I'm just going to ask, what are you currently using to solve this problem? And what have you tried in the past? Like that was a great starting point.
Yep.
And from there, just having this kind of motivation of like, I think initially I was like, oh, I got to keep all this theory in my head and then do the interview. And once you're doing them and you're practicing, I think, and I'm still not very good at them. I'm trying to get better, but I found like just by doing them a bit, asking people, you know, when did you first think about, you know, doing this? When did you first think about joining Product People Club? What was going on at the time? And, you know, you're asking these questions like, where is this going to lead? And then a guy goes, well, I signed up for Product People Club. I just quit my job the day before. And you're like, whoa, that's a big trigger. Like, wow. So, and I'm working in my house by myself. I used to be surrounded by people. Wow. Okay. Now we're into things.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's how I've kind of gotten over that anxiety. And also just doing it, like just being like, I'm just going to start talking to people. I'm going to call them. It's going to feel awkward, but I found just like by doing them, I feel better about it. But what are some of your tips?
So I like to think of it as acting, right? Okay. So think of yourself as adopting this persona of basically like, I know nothing. And that actually kind of helps the interview too. Like I literally know nothing. Don't assume anything and just ask questions. Be naturally curious about things.
Yes.
And no matter what, you know, again, you don't need to make it so complicated. You're just trying to just draw the story of old way to new way. How did you get from old way to the new way? And then just try to fill in that story as much as possible, and just to be curious and asking questions. There are no dumb questions. People, it's really funny. It's very cathartic for people, I feel like, when they're being interviewed, because it's like, oh my gosh, this guy cares about me and like my struggles. And I mean, the only people who get offended by that, I mean, you know, 99% of the time, right?
Yeah.
Or right. It's people who are lying, actually. Because when you start asking these very poignant questions, they start getting defensive. And it's because like, okay. And like, that's when you realize, oh, okay, this person's basically making it up, and I'm kind of like nailing down, but that's an aside. But basically if people are, you know, they're already interested in talking to you. And if you just show that you're naturally curious about, okay, you know, like what was so wrong about the old way? Like, you know, what's Justin, what's like, so what, what's wrong with driving to work every day? And like, what's wrong with that? Like, I like driving, like, it's 45 minutes and like, and then there's traffic, and then I show up, and then like the foreman's there and he yells at me, and like, oh, why is he yelling at me? He's an asshole. Yeah. Like, oh, like, you know, just like you're naturally curious and you kind of understand these things. So that's.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just taking notes at the same time here. Yeah, I think that's great. And the empathy. The other thing I always tell people why they should do these kinds of things, even before I understood jobs, like just getting on the phone with potential customers and current customers, is really empathizing with those people is going to give you such an advantage. Like it really, over quantitative data, over all that stuff, that qualitative, hearing it from somebody and really unearthing these emotional things that are going on in their lives. Yep. It is cathartic, especially as you learn to do it better. And sometimes I don't know if this is bad jobs to be done, but sometimes I will empathize as in like, oh man, I felt that way too. And it gets people to open up even more, like, oh man, because some of these emotional jobs are embarrassing, you know, people don't want to admit that they're a 36-year-old man that's going to a coffee shop so he can look cool, you know?
Right, exactly.
It takes like this empathy and understanding. And when you do it well and when they're comfortable, you really do get to this place. And what I found helpful about it is it helps me feel less slimy as a product person and a marketer, because I'm like, if I can solve this for this person, it will genuinely affect their lives.
Yep.
So if I can take away Justin's commute, it will really improve his life. Like, this isn't like some fake bullshit. It's like, this is a real solution that's really going to help this real human being that I really talk to.
Yep. Yeah. The topic of empathy is, I mean, that's a whole nother thing. Cause that's a term which is, I see is often misused and often abused. Actually, there's a great video out there if everyone's listening. Heinz Kohut, Reflections on Empathy.
Okay.
You have to go watch it right here, because he's the guy who put empathy on the map in the whole psychoanalysis world. But he makes the point that, and this will help you if you're doing it in your interviews, because empathy is not, okay, it's not sympathy, which is, it's, sympathy is like togetherness. So it's not about sharing someone's feelings. It's about, okay, do I understand what this, like, why this person is reacting this way? And then what can I say or do to kind of get them to react in a certain way? Mm-hmm. So if you're doing an interview and someone is talking about the struggle, and maybe it's not a struggle that you identify with, like, that's okay. But as long as you can at least understand why that they are struggling, and then know how to kind of, and if you can explain that, like, that's really good, because empathy, it's an informant of appropriate action. It's like, okay, do I have enough information in my mind to explain to myself why Justin hates the morning commute? Like, can I answer that question? Yes or no? It's not about like, oh yes, I know what it's like to drive in a morning commute. I mean, that's like the sympathy route. It's more of like, okay, do I understand why Justin? Okay, yes, it's these 5 things. Yeah,
that's awesome. All right, now we're gonna end with the very hard question. It comes from, I gotta scroll up here. Writing Investigated asks, how does Coca-Cola stay relevant? It's basically been the same for 100 years, apart from Coke Light and Zero. Why haven't people moved on, like in the kale example? Mm-hmm. So how do you see jobs to be done in terms of Coke, and maybe Coke as a company, and how they like keep progressing? How would you answer that?
Yep. So okay, so we're full circle now.
Yeah.
Right? So that goes to the very beginning, which is Coke still delivers progress that people want. And their definition of progress has not changed. Like, that's maybe an unsatisfying answer, but that's how I would answer. It's just that, it's kind of like going back to our iPhone example.
Yeah.
Like, if civilization collapsed tomorrow, the iPhone 6 would still be the hottest smartphone in the market for the next 100 years.
Yeah.
That's because, that definition of progress has not changed. That picture in my mind is still the same, and Coke still delivers me that type of progress. And then actually, if you look, that's actually, if you go back in the 80s, why did Pepsi gain some market share over Coke in the 80s? Remember the Pepsi challenge and whatever. Yeah. It's because for a short time, Pepsi was actually more cool. Like, that was the cool drink, and they had positioned themselves, the Pepsi generation and whatever. Like, they were the cutting edge thing, and they were able to redefine what progress meant to a particular group of people. Yeah, they were able to gain market share over Coke. But then I guess, Pepsi lost that for whatever reason. Yeah. Maybe because Pepsi has this record of buying cool. They like attach themselves with a celebrity, which works for a short amount of time. But once that celebrity falls out of favor, it's like, oh, Britney Spears drinks Coke. Oh.
Yeah. Does that make you think about Pepsi, strategically solving certain jobs? Like, maybe cool is a bad job to solve, and it would be better to do something else? Or, and I mean, I think we could also get into this idea of, Coke, and you bring this up in the book too. You've got so many great examples in the book, but you talk about, like, it's not always good to just add features onto the existing product. Yeah. Sometimes it's better to create a collection of products that works as a whole. Yep. And that help people move kind of up in progress. And if we think about Coke, we had New Coke, which was Coke trying to say, well, let's expand the idea of what Coke is.
Yeah.
And it failed. People did not like it. But if we look at Coke, you know, like right now, what's the progress people are making? They used to drink 3 Cokes a day. And then they realized that Coke is really bad for you.
Okay, this is good.
All their friends are like, you are going to get sick. So there's this peer pressure. Every day they're like, dude, you got to quit drinking Coke.
Yep.
And now everyone in the office is drinking La Croix, right? And or some sort of fizzy soda water. And so now for Coke, they're going, you know, and I'm sure they've already done this, they're going to add to their collection of products. We're going to buy La Croix. And now people are going to say, I used to drink Coke, but it no longer satisfies my for progress or
it's no longer giving me progress I want, whatever. Or my progress has changed.
I want. Now I'm going to move to La Croix for all sorts of, and I'm probably saying La Croix. Is it La Croix?
CROIX? Is that it?
It's French, but it comes from the South. So I don't know how they say it. In Canada, we would say La Croix. But, you know, people are hiring now that soda water for all sorts of emotional reasons, right? It's so that their spouse quits nagging them about being unhealthy. Yeah. It's so that when they're in the office, they're not the only one drinking Coke and all these other healthy people are drinking kale beverages and everything else, right? So I think if we looked at Coke's soda pop market share, it's probably going, not market share, but consumption of soda is going down.
Yeah, it is. It is. And actually, I'll jump in here. I don't know if you have it where you are. I see the ads here in New York. Coke is coming up with a new version of it, or like a separate product.
Okay.
It actually has a green label, like, you know, green, like healthy green.
Okay.
But it's like Coke, except made with like, it's like half the amount of sugar. It's like made with real cane sugar and stevia. So it's no longer the high fructose corn syrup stuff. It's like, it's natural sugar, like from stevia and like natural cane sugar, not the processed stuff.
Yeah.
So kind of going back to that question that you had given, it's like, you know, what happened was that for whatever reason, people's definition of progress had changed. It's like, okay, you know, now it's like, I want to be more healthy, and classic Coke no longer gives me that. So I'm going to switch to something else. But Coke realized, okay, our classic Coke is not delivering that progress. So we need to figure that out. Okay, let's come up with a more healthier version of Coke.
Yeah. And this really is, I think, like if you're going to make things for a living, this is kind of our calling. And again, you paint the picture so great in the book, but this calling of, you have to continually kind of be ahead of where people are going.
Yes.
And so like, you can't just be satisfied with, and Apple is so good at this. Apple does creative destruction on itself, which is so weird. Like they're all, and often before the masses are ready, you know? So you give the example of them killing the iPod and really going on the iPhone, but they've done this with so many things. They've done this with USB ports. They've done this with, you know, all sorts of things. They're always like, you know what, we're going to kill that and we're going to move to this next thing. And it's almost like you as a maker can never be satisfied with how you're serving people.
Right. So that kind of goes back to the thing too about why we should not focus on functionality and features. It's just about how can, like, your business is not to deliver a checklist of features or functionality. Your business is to help people make progress. And that's like, and if that means like killing off your product or introducing, you know, ideally introducing a new product, which people will switch to, which, okay, so that's, people don't talk about this very much, but that was Apple's genius, okay? It's not so much that, okay, we killed off our own product. It was, we were able to migrate iPod users to the iPhone. Like that was like, they created this user base and then they knew, okay, we're going to get these people to switch from this product to our next version of our other product. So that's, you know, you have to think about that too.
Yeah. And if you look at their advertising with your jobs to be done hat on, you will get it. Like when they introduce a new iPhone and they have that video, look at all the emotional jobs that they're painting the picture of, and it creates, is it pull? I don't know. Pull and push. It creates this pull towards the new solution, because you're like, I've got this iPod Classic, but I can't take photos and I can't look at them taking photos and laughing with their kids, and look at them using those photo filters on their face, and oh man, this isn't good enough anymore. And so even if there's some people that are like, no, don't take away my iPod Classic, they're creating this pull that's pulling most people forward. And they're fine with saying, you know what, we're not going to be in the iPod Classic business for 100 years.
Yeah. So that's, I think okay. So what you just talked about is what every great salesperson knows. And I mean, I guess from my own experience of having to do sales on my own product myself, you're right. You need to drop, push, and pull at the same time. And I think the example I very briefly used in the book is selling grills. It's like, if you've got one of those small Weber grills, you're not a very good salesman if you just say, oh, that grill you have, that sucks. You can't cook for 20 people. They'll be like, oh, you're right, I can't. Yeah. I'm like, sucks for you. Then walk off. It's like, no. What you gotta do? You have to do both, push and pull. Yeah. You can't cook for 20 people, because then, imagine all your kids running around and everyone from the neighborhood comes to your house and thinks you're a hero. Like, yeah, that's great. So let's push. But then you say, oh, look, I've got a grill over here, which will do that for you. And they're like, oh, so now they're pulled toward your solution. So it's both. It's not just telling you, oh, your iPhone, the iPhone 6 takes crappy pictures. Yeah. That's not going to win you customers. It's, our does, whatever, 10% better or 20% better than the iPhone 6 photos. And look, here they are. And then in the customer's mind, they're rejecting their current solution. This is no longer working for me. Yeah. But that one does. Yeah. Dude, this has been amazing. I think we're going to have to do a part 2 sometime. Sure. Absolutely. Even we got a bit into this idea of forces and things that push you forward and pull you back. But folks, there's seriously so much to cover. And my recommendation would be to go to When Kale and Coffee Compete. That's the landing page for the book right now. And you can get notified when it's released. It's going to be a free download. Is that right? And then you can also buy it on Kindle. Yeah. So what's going to happen is, so I guess I'm like this hippie, I guess. Right. Mm-hmm. So, I don't, I think knowledge should be free. Right. And that works great today. So I'm going to release it for free on a PDF. I'm also going to have it as its own Medium collection. So each story, each chapter is going to be its own Medium story and a collection of the job. But then, for the people who do on their Kindle or the paperback, I will be selling that as well. That's awesome, dude. And if you want to reach out to Alan, he's on Twitter, Alan Klement. That's Klement with a K. And again, dude, thanks so much for being here. This is there's a lot of comments here. The biggest one is, whoa, this guy's smart. So really appreciate you sharing that stuff. I'm sorry, actually, if you can stretch it out a little bit longer, I have to thank guys like Justin, who I interviewed for this book. This is not, this wasn't like I'm some mad genius or something. It was I had been applying jobs myself, and I was like, there's all these holes. I can't figure it out. So actually I approached jobs like building a product. It's okay, I need to talk to about as many people as I can who've used this. How have they used it? How are they successful? How are they not successful? And it was only through like case studies in the book and people like Justin who have applied jobs in successful ways that I was able to connect all the dots. So, I'm sorry, I have to give a shout to Justin, because it was only because people like you that I was able to figure it out, to fill in my own missing spots. Wow, dude, I appreciate it so much. As I'm reading the book, I'm so glad someone put this together, because it is, again, it's sophisticated is the word I'm going to use. It's just layer on layer on layer. And I think people are going to really like it. So any sense of when you're going to be kind of releasing it? I was going to do it today, but maybe tomorrow.
Really? Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Alan.
Yeah, no problem.